today's event is sponsored by Viru Cypher, and thank you, Siddhant and Subodh from Team Viru Cypher for making this evening possible. The first panel, I think, as Joel has already mentioned quite elaborately, that we will be looking at the entrepreneurship landscape. And I think let me jump straight into welcoming our panelists for this session. Aditya Malik, Managing Director and CEO of Talent Bridge. Amit Agnihotri, the founder of MBAUniverse.com. Ratna Mehta, EVP, Badwani Catalyst Fund, and our moderator and chair, Joel Panikot. So over to you, panelists.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Shivangi. Um, like I said, a little ado is a good thing. But great. Thank you so much to my fellow panelists as well, Ratna, Aditya, Amit, for participating in this conversation. And so since I did spend some time laying the context for where we are, what I'd like to do is to invite each of our panelists to, from their very unique context, talk about what are what do you view this topic as, and kind of lay the context for your perspective on the education technology entrepreneurship landscape. And I'd like to invite Ratna to start, and then we can go over to Aditya and then Amit. Ratna, over to you.
Thank you so much, Joel. Pleasure being part of this panel. It's a really interesting topic, and something which has been buzzing in the last 8-9 months as we're all battling with COVID. So thank you so much, and good evening to all the participants. Just a very short introduction. I lead the Global Impact Fund at the Wadhwani Catalyst, and the Wadhwani Foundation overall has a philosophy of basically backing entrepreneurs and creating more entrepreneurs, which in turn can help grow the economy and create a lot of jobs, right? And education is a very, very important pillar which kind of helps us do this, right? So when Joel, you asking me that how do you think that this whole education, the evolving trends, etc., how do we view it, right? So for example, we have two entrepreneurs on this panel, and they will vouch by it, that creating more and more entrepreneurs in an emerging country like India is what is going to drive the success and drive the 5 billion target that we have for our country. And when you want to do this, a lot. So when we look at the landscape of education right now, it's very interesting when you see any decks on education, any report on education, you talk to investors, they will talk about this entire gamut, end-to-end value chain, right? From K-12 to say, when the student is trying to look for a job, which is basically test prep for graduation and then getting into a job, as well as when you want to get in, the training that is required for a job, as well as the continuous learning, everything is evolving, right? And what was happening in the last few years is there were bubbles in terms of the entire digital landscape, right? Things were going digital. You had a Bedouin emerging in K-12. You had an academy evolving on the test prep side. You had an upgrade come in to train students who are looking for jobs. But, there was still a little bit of a mindset, especially in India, with, the mobile penetration gradually picking up and Geo doing the magic of, reaching internet to everybody. There was still a mindset of saying that, how do we do online? We've all been used to classroom education. But this pandemic, while there are a lot of negatives, there have been some mindset changes, as you were saying, right? That even, people who are of the age of our parents have now started adopting to technology. So I think this is a huge pivot and a landmark change that has happened in education, where people have started accepting that education can be done online. And therefore, the entire ability to, the interesting opportunities that I see over here is a lot more on the continuous learning side, because India needs a lot of skilling on the test prep side, because there is a lot of competition in that space. And slowly but surely, it is also evolving in the K-12 side. So I think there are trends across the entire value chain. Some segments are more stronger right now, but I am very confident that even the new education policy that is coming up is in the right direction to say that, the rote learning is behind us. Let's talk about more practical things. Let's talk about application, etc. So I think that there are winds of change and in the right direction. So kudos to a lot of entrepreneurs who've been at this, and this is their time under the sun right now.
That's a wonderful thought, Ratna, and kind of thank you for setting the context as well. Like you said, this the continuum of education is seeing a lot of opportunities at various spaces. Aditya, over to you. What are your thoughts on like Ratna also spoke about the edtech entrepreneurship landscape right now, coming from your context?
So thanks, Joel. Hi, good evening, everyone. So I'm Aditya Malik. I run Talent Edge, which we are a higher ed edtech company focusing on continuing education programs. So we focus typically on postgrad and undergrad students on continuing education as well as job link programs. So we were edtech before the COVID hit, and we are edtech even after the COVID has hit. So life hasn't changed apart from it's changing for good. So I think from the landscape perspective, if I have to crudely put, I will say that for edtech as a whole, अच्छे दिन आ गए हैं. Finally, अच्छे दिन आ गए हैं. So that's where I would say, because the what COVID has done, it has not increased the demand. Demand was always high. At least in our segment, demand was never a constraint. Neither was supply nor was the demand a constraint. What it has done, it has just mainstreamed the education technology as a whole, where people have started getting used to the fact that the education can happen on technology. I think in higher ed segment, the adoption was anyway fairly high. What has happened is that the school segment or the K-12 segment, the adoption has been mainstreamed. Although with players like Byju's and all, with ads and all, they were anyway kind of actively promoting that. So, but I think this time when the schools are teaching online, it has almost kind of mainstream the education. But having said that, from a business opportunity perspective, from a landscape of entrepreneurship perspective, I think the time has come. I still feel it's a nascent sector. We are scraping the barrel. It's we all irrespective of whichever whatever the valuation of the company is, whether it's a unicorn, whether it's $2 billion valuation, $1 billion valuation, all the numbers which we read in Economic Times. I think in spite of that, we have not even nowhere close to kind of 20-30% of the market. The opportunity is so huge. The real question which will come up is that what will make money, what will not make money, what will scale up, what will not scale up, and that we will deliberate as the discussion goes on. But I feel the time has come, and this is the moment for EdTech industry, which we all have been waiting for quite some time. So
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Aditya. And you're right. The time has come is probably one of the most encouraging phrases that one could talk about. And I'd love to talk a bit more about this with you as well. Moving over to Amit, from your very unique experience, not just from the perspective of being the founder of MBA Universe and the convener of the Indian Management Conclave, I know you've worked a lot in the policy space as well, trying to help create, at least within the business management ecosystem, a certain sense of structure. And this is well before the NEP came out. So I'd love your perspective on the landscape as it is right now, how it has impacted you, and how this conversation can maybe throw light on what's in it for entrepreneurs and investors alike.
So thank you so much, Joel. Thank you, Mumbai Angels Network. Thank you for inviting me. I will talk this from two perspectives. One is my own little journey, and what are some of the things over there which can be helpful for this audience. And the other is a framework that I'll very briefly talk about, and if there is time and interest, then we can get into more of it. So I run MBAuniverse.com, which was set up about 12 years back when EdTech as a word was I don't know whether it was coined or, when was it coined. So we are about 12 years old, and we broke even in the third month of our business. And ever since then, this has been a fascinating journey. About 10 years back, I set up a conference called Indian Management Conclave. And Aditya, Joel, both of you have supported this conference. Now, this is being hosted by IIM Ahmedabad, IIM Bangalore, ISB, and all the top schools of the country. And all this was, built brick by brick. So, so the message is that if you get the model right, you can break even in third month, fourth month, 6 months. Of course, you may not want to break even, and you may have a different approach. Your lens could be different, but the message that I have is that it's possible to make money very, very early in education, sector if you get your model right. The second bit is about very briefly about the current times and the focus on edtech. Of course, we had the Nalandas and the Takshilas, which were set up, way back. But even if you look at the higher education model, which I have a little bit of understanding, Cambridge University was set up in 1209. That's about 800 years old. And we have seen, and similarly for Oxford and other great universities, and we have seen the amount of change that has happened through the flux of technology, through the infusion of technology in the last 3 decades, 2.5 decades. So this model, which was built 800 years old or 800 years back, is ready now to be disrupted. And there are different pieces of this model. And I think entrepreneurs, if they look at this model, the value delivery model of higher education, and if they break it down and do a little bit of more micro analysis, then they would be able to definitely create a lot of value your own value comes last, but value for your, audiences and your customers and your businesses that you work with. And really, there are 3 very quickly pieces of higher education delivery model that I want to talk about today. The first is the input side to an higher education institution, which is extremely important. Who goes in terms of, who's the student, what is the student like, where does he or she come from? And there are many dimensions to this world as far as the input to a higher education institution are concerned. There are issues around pure demand, because lots of schools and lots of colleges and lots of universities have actually shut down in the last few years just because they didn't have the right reach. So at the basic level, you're solving a problem of reach, which digital platforms like, let's say, mbauniverse.com or some of our worthy peers are solving. And then there are layers to the inputs that goes into higher education, which is diversity, inclusion, internationalization, so on and so forth. To tell you that, even at ISB, a top business school like ISB, there are only 5 students coming from outside India. And we are talking about globalization. That's the amount of opportunity that is available in India. If somebody could help ISB get global in that aspect, ISB will pay whatever you are asking, just to give you a context. The second piece is very quickly about the process, the academic process, which goes inside a business school, and tremendous opportunity there. For instance, you look at the whole teaching learning process and what digital technologies and digital platforms have done. And flipped classroom, for example, are now a given. So there is tremendous amount of value creation that's possible when it comes to the academic processes and the living experience. So that's the second piece. And the third piece is, the outcomes that you expect from higher education institutions. For example, placements, for example, research and dissemination of research, entrepreneurship, lifelong learning, etc., etc. So input, process, and outcome, expected outcome is, if you look at these 3 aspects of a higher education, institutions value delivery model, you will be able to figure out that there are tremendous opportunities. For example, Coursera is just tackling, or Talented is tackling one aspect of this value delivery process, which is lifelong learning. And it's not just that today education ends the time you get out of the portals of your university or college, but actually it has to go on for your life. So tremendous opportunities, and it's possible for you to create great value if you do micro segmentation and help your stakeholders gain value.
Thank you so much, Amit. I think that's a very nice context that you've laid for the ecosystem as a whole. So thank you all three of you for kind of your opening comments. And now I guess we can get into this little rapid fire conversation space where we can talk about various different models, various different parts of the academic, parts of the educational ecosystem, and your thoughts on what is happening within them. And Ratna, I'll come to you with my first question. What are the businesses you are seeing emerging the most? Where do you see entrepreneurs acting the most?
See, I think what is happening right now is that there is a big, there are pockets in which there is a lot of flurry that is happening, right? So K-12 and after school, which is the coding thing, right? Within the K-12 segment, that is really emerging well. And I think all of us on the panel, as well as the, some of the listeners are aware of the White Hat deal, which kind of got tom-tommed everywhere. I think that has, every time a big deal gets done, there a lot of things emerge around it. Peripherally, you'll see a lot of things, a lot of action happening. But, the coding, which is actually getting focused at, college students and for skilling or for getting jobs, I think that is gaining a lot of traction and that is becoming very attractive. So that is a space, like, for example, you have Masai School, you have certain other players who are, very early stage in this, but they're looking very good, right? Second, where I'm seeing a lot of action is on the online test prep side, right? Traditionally, we've had, organizations based out of Kota and Kanpur and Delhi, Bombay being hubs for these test preps, right? The tier 2 through tier 3s did not have access to that kind of, training, if you may say. What has happened now is there are a lot of these aggregator platforms, right? Like you have your Unacademies, Vedantus. You also have new and emerging players in this space who are aggregating some of the best content and providing it to people who don't have access. And that on the government side is also emerging. Like Pariksha is a very small player over there in terms of, providing content in regional languages to people who don't have access, right? So, as they say that India lives beyond the metros. And if you really want to cover and penetrate, you have to look at that population and this term that investors and researchers and consultants have claimed is the next billion. If you want to reach over there, I think these are some of the things which are really going to make a difference. And the third bucket where I see, and which you mentioned, which Amit also mentioned, and Aditya is living that on a daily basis, is the continuous learning, right? Learning for earning is something which is, really becoming very important because as we progress and as our per capita income increases, the requirement of the talent is going to change with AI and analytics and everything coming in. So I think that is another important segment where there are a lot of entrepreneurs coming up, a lot of government push and support is available for it. Various programs like NEETI is running hundreds of programs, for them, some specific to women. Invest India is doing similar things. Every government separately. I mean, I was just having a conversation with somebody today who said the Karnataka government has started a huge youth entrepreneurship program. So there are, lot of actions on the government front, on the private front, on the investor fronts, because the investors are now focusing dollars towards these spaces, because that helps kind of start the whole cycle. So you start funding, then there are new players coming in, they are growing and they're creating an ecosystem around it.
That's very interesting, Ratna. Thank you so much for that. And I think that these are opportunities that are coming from various spaces, and entrepreneurs are looking at and building businesses. But Aditya, I want to ask you this with your dual hat, as an entrepreneur and an investor. what would you ask entrepreneurs to guard against in a space where suddenly everyone is talking all achedin, everything is all gung ho? What would you ask entrepreneurs to be careful about? As an investor?
So I think a couple of things. First, don't start with the assumption that what you are building is the next Google or a Facebook, and you'll be a unicorn like a an academy or a Baiju in a 2 months time. Sounds cliche, but that's the reality. Not going to happen that easily. Neither a white hat junior deals come. I mean, everybody want the moment that deal was announced, everybody wanted to be a white hat junior the next day morning. That also doesn't happen. The reality is that I think what is that two things I would just say. One, edtech by definition is all about technology, but technology still is a means of delivery. Technology is not an end in itself. I think the most of the effort has to go in terms of the sales process. One of the successes of Baiju has been its sales processes. For whatever it is worth, they have done a phenomenal job of expanding the market. Two, obviously the content and the pedagogy in a edtech world are hygiene. I mean, I'm not getting there. I mean, I'm not going there because that's given. If you don't have a good content, don't have good pedagogy, you don't deserve to be a tech company or don't deserve to be education company. But I think treat technology as an enabler, not an end in itself. Number one, so focus on sales. Two, I think it's extremely important in today's environment to focus on profitability and unit economics from day one. With in the overall ecosystem, with the fiascos like Uber, WeWork, all that stuff happening all across in the global environment, the funding is not easy if unit economics are not positive or they are not moving in the right direction. Those days of chasing blind growth and with $1 million losses are gone. I mean, yes, there are firms which will get lucky. Yes, there are firms which will get get the kind of funding which they are looking for in spite of millions of dollars of losses. But reality is that they will be far and few. So if I have to pick these two things, will be these two. One, focus on sales, use technology as an enabler, and focus on unit economics and profitability from day one, so that even if you don't get funded or you don't see a potential money coming your way, you don't have to shut down and wind up your shop. So that will be my two key messages.
What you're doing is making it difficult for entrepreneurs who have grown up on on the image of whether it's the Baijus or the Zuckerbergs, building a company and growing valuations without and profitability being something that comes later. But in fact, on this note, I'll come to Amit, because you mentioned that within the first 3 months you were able to break even, and then from there on it's been growth. What would you say are the top 2 or 3 things that you did right as an organization in order to that's something that entrepreneurs can take away from this conversation?
Yeah, so there are a few things that I've done right and a lot of things that I've done wrong. Yeah, so I think what we did right was to be very clear from the day one about the fact that we are not building an organization for valuation, or we are not building an organization for eventual sellout, etc., etc. We saw it very simply as there is a need, and can we build a model that is superior than the conventional model? And our premise was very simple, that 12 years back, newspapers, magazines, etc., etc., were pretty much prevalent when it comes to being the platform for information on education, right? I remember seeing 20-page education supplements in 2008, 9, 10. Yeah, these used to be massive 20, 25-page pullouts. And one looked at the environment and said, of course this is going to go away, and what could be the platform? And that's where we picked up a niche, and we could have been a horizontal, serving engineering, management, law, etc., etc. But again, then we thought that eventually platforms like Google would be the biggest competitor in terms of aggregator of information. So if we are purely aggregating information, which some of these platforms are, then eventually we will get caught. So let's be the super specialist of our area and build deep value, deep moats, value proposition. And within 3 months' time, we had the audience. Within 6 months' time, we had the advertising, that sustained us. The first conference that we did was, had surplus sponsorship, and so on and so forth. So I think it all, I agree with Aditya. If you're building a platform for valuation and eventual sellout, possibly you need to re-examine. Of course, it's very old-fashioned, and I am old-fashioned that way. It's very old-fashioned to think about it. But I think if you are creating something genuinely for solving a problem, you will get there.
Super useful. So, what I'm hearing from you is to aim very specifically at problem solving and keeping valuation aside. What I'm hearing from Aditya as well is think more of immediate profitability, or at least a path to profit, where you are looking very specifically at. So, are both of you as entrepreneurs feeling that this is bootstrap is better than just large valuation numbers? Aditya, what do you say?
No, I don't think so. I'm not saying that even for this thing. I'm just saying that just don't take your eye off the ball, which is don't take eye off the profitability, because I think the world has changed. I think funding is required. I think significant amount of gas is required in the tank to grow. But the capital should be growth capital, not burn capital. These are the only difference I would just say. So that's how I would look at the capital. Obviously, initially when you're setting up, you need some burn capital also. But as long as moving in the right direction and the bulk of the money beyond a certain point of time is used for growth, that's the way to go. Those days of heavy EBITDA losses and then somebody bankrolling you are gone.
Right, that's true. And yet you still. So, is there a systemic problem? And this is something I want to ask Ratna. Is there a systemic problem where the stories in the media are only about companies that have gotten bankrolled, have spent the big bucks, and aren't yet profitable, whereas smaller organizations that are doing good work have a path to profitability aren't being talked about as much? Is there something that needs to be done around that?
So very, very interesting, point. And this doesn't really get discussed very often, but we have two very esteemed and solid entrepreneurs over here, and they will understand this more than anybody else. A lot of the press is around successes, and that always happens. And a lot of the successes are around valuations, right? Around investing. But there are a lot of solid business. And, one other important thing which came up in this conversation and which is relevant to a lot of our listeners are the unit economics, at least at the gross margin level. Whenever investors have started looking at businesses or evaluating businesses, they want that profitability. They want to see the path to profitability quickly in the journey. And that is very, very important. A lot of businesses which are operating at profitability level, they are very content. They, a lot of them are funded by relevant HNIs, relevant people from industries. I see a lot of education businesses, healthcare businesses funded by angels and all, and they not necessarily want to go in for the big bucks, because a lot of the larger investors have certain ticket size restrictions, and when you have that, you may require $1, but then you may raise $10, and that raising that $10 may make you do certain things in a different manner. So yes, to some extent, a lot of the media is around fundraising and around large fundraisers. But with a little bit of in-depth coverage now happening of the startup industry, you have a lot of new platforms come up. You had the VC Circle first, now you have the Your Story, and you have Inc. 42 and a lot of others. A lot more coverage is coming for early stage entrepreneurs, and entrepreneurs who not necessarily always focus on fundraising, but they are doing a good job in terms of what they are building it out.
Wonderful.
Can I add something to that?
Please. Yes, please, Amit.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to resonate a couple of things that Ratna has said. I believe that the way media is structured, and I was part of the media industry for a very long time, I still am. Either so only two things sell, great success stories or great failures, and that's what makes it to the headlines of business press. They have a business to run, and I think entrepreneurs must understand this and realize this, that media is an entity that is not there for public good necessarily. They are running a business and they have to create headlines because headlines sell, and then that's where their business model is. And the second point that I want to briefly talk about is that small is beautiful. This is my message to everyone who cares to listen, that small is beautiful as long as you know that you're building a great product which will last for the next decades, 2 decades, 3 decades, 4 decades. And Ratna mentioned platforms like Your Story, for example. Now, are they big or they small? Nobody, it doesn't matter to anyone. Are they creating some value for their stakeholders? And if they are doing that, they eventually will become profitable. And similar is my story of having created two platforms. One is exchangeformedia.com, which I co-founded way back in 2000. And we started with a very different idea of building a electronic marketplace, e-marketplace for media buying and selling, which happened 10 years later. But we converted it into that failure into a success, where we said, okay, let the commerce happen later. We will create content, and content will create community, which will eventually create commerce. So content, community, commerce, that's the model. And similar is the model of MBAuniverse.com and Indian Management Conclave and a few other things. So small is beautiful. Don't be enamored by the headlines and the valuations. Only the success. We did a study with one of the top IIMs in the country, and we figured out that only 1.5% of startups succeed in the country. Right? You have to be in that 1.5% for you to get a chance to get into the second year, third year, fourth year, fifth year, and so on. So small is beautiful as long as you know what you're doing. You will get success.
And if I may just one line, if I may add on the media side of it, I learned it hard way. I coming into this, I was not aware of that. But the news and media to a large extent is how much money you spend on PR. So that's the reality, unfortunate reality, but it is what it is.
So that makes a lot of sense, and that's something I think what we talked about is something both entrepreneurs, investors obviously have this kind of wider lens and a very different agenda from entrepreneurs. But I find that entrepreneurs typically being younger tend to get swept a lot by the very behavioral biases that make up our mental, the way we approach business, the way we approach ambition even. So this is definitely something that all of us should pay attention to. I'd like to invite all of our panelists to unmute your mics, and I'm going to go through a quick word association. Tell me the first word that you think of when I say the following. Ratna, entrepreneur.
Hard work.
Sorry?
Hard work.
Aditya, technology.
Enabler.
Amit, opportunity.
What you do with it.
It's foul. Ratna, content.
Key.
Aditya, learning.
Crux of it. Crux. That's the
Amit, success.
How you look at it. It's very internal.
Internal is a good word. So great. On that note, what I'll do is I'll ask each of you, and I'll give you just one sentence to wrap up what you think investors and entrepreneurs should take away from our conversation, and then I'll invite Shivangi for closing comments. So Ratna, over to you. One sentence.
Right place, right time is very important, with all the luck and the hard work that you need and you put in. And this is the time for, EdTech entrepreneurs to shine, make the most of it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Aditya, your one sentence.
So I said it earlier, अच्छे दिन आ गए हैं. We are in it and we are looking forward to enjoy the journey further.
Brilliant. Amit, your one sentence?
I will offer two sentences, okay? Pardon me for that. One is that, it's like the wave in the ocean. What you're seeing may not remain there for after 6 months or a year. So right now, EdTech is right at the top in terms of share of mind, etc. But that may or may not remain as you go into the post-COVID world. Be ready, build your plans based on that assumption rather than this assumption. And second is, be your own, be on your own, be your own. I mean, think for yourself rather than someone that you ape for.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And Shivangi, your sentences now.
Sorry, my sentences I think are a lot of sentences. Being the organizer, I think I have a free pass. So I think firstly, I think this has been a fabulous panel. I think from an angel investing network perspective, one key takeaway that we have is that this is the opportunity for EdTech startups to capitalize on. One is that there is significant audience interest, which may not have been so evident in the past. Entrepreneurs had to work harder to sell their products, even though there might have been funding available at hand. I think another important point that has come across is that one needs to be very, very careful about the extent to which you can scale up. And hence, I think some of the important points that Ratna and the others also mentioned that you need to decide what kind of scale up you want to do and hence the funding, because otherwise that may change the basic story that you are going for and which may derail your plans or actually enhance them. That time will tell, but to try and fit in that. Is there anything else, Joel, that you wish to add?
This, I think, it's been a very good start to the summit. So I really want to thank Ratna, Aditya, Amit. Thank you so much for giving your time and your inputs. 40 minutes was never going to be enough, but we had to make do with what we had. And in this webinar fatigue-driven world, I think this has been a good starting point. But I'd love for us to continue this dialogue. Once again, thanks to the Mumbai Angels team.